that most of the employee actually downloads multiple softwares from the internet and they just install that to use it. So what the issue is that most of those software that is kind of freely available to download from the internet, they have certain kind of malware embedded in them. Okay, so let's say Adobe Flash Player, for an example, or maybe Adobe PDF, for an example, if downloaded from a non-official website. So in most cases, what will happen? It will have the info stealer malware embedded in that. And what that malware does is that once you kind of install, once the employee install the software, those kind of malwares, what they do is like they grab the passwords and all of the system, let's say of the employee, and they kind of send that out to the malware item. Okay, so that is one of the common way by which credentials can be compromised. So one of the cases I like to discuss is that there were multiple employees when I was working for a company. There were multiple employees who were kind of downloading multiple different kind of softwares, and what would happen is that they were all affected by the infostor malware. Okay, and at that time the protections, the security controls that are in the that were in the system of the employees were not kind of catching those infostor malwares. And so what would happen is that all the malwares, all the credentials of the systems were kind of collected in that case, and the malware author actually had a big list, like let's say more than 2 GB of file, 2 GB of file, which would contain the username, password, and the URL. And that file was actually getting sold out in the black market. Okay, and the attacker were kind of downloading those credentials, which were kind of collected by us several means, and then they were kind of using that to kind of perform a targeted attack against an organization. Okay, so there are a lot of things that can happen in the compromised credentials. So there are a lot of attack vectors to say, like common attack vectors are common, like compromised credentials, weak on strong credentials, like weak credentials, like the credentials are very kind of easy to guess, malicious insiders, or like let's say no encryption. For an example, let's say there's a website which is kind of handling highly confidential data, but somehow that website is kind of running on HTTP mode. Okay, so if it is running on HTTP mode, anyone who has access to the routers, or let's say, or any kind of network devices through which the traffic is ongoing between the client and the web server, they can kind of get hold of the data, of the highly confidential data that is kind of managed, or that is kind of transferred between the client and the server. Okay, so those are one of the kind of common attack vectors we can see. Then the other attack vector is misconfiguration. So where kind of servers, let's say there are server which is kind of handling the confidential data or highly confidential data, and it is misconfigured. So let's say the plan was to kind of keep that server internally accessible. Let's say only the internal team uses that, but somehow there was a misconfiguration, and the server was kind of, let's say, uh, the server was kind of accessible via internet, for example. Okay, so that is one kind of misconfiguration that can kind of happen. And since it was kind of publicly accessible, so let's say the attacker were able to kind of scan that, and they were able to access the content of that and kind of uh, spill out, like let's say, multiple highly confidential data from there. Okay, so attack vector, that is one misconfiguration by which the attacker can come up. The other attack vector, which is kind of very common, is like phishing attack. So phishing attack is something where normally thing is that it can happen via different ways. One of the most common ways like email. So email will have, let's say, malicious link or malicious attachment in it, and what it does is like the attacker actually sends those emails, to those tricky emails to the employees, and the employees get tricked out, and what they do is like they click or download the attachment. So one of the common example of phishing attack is, let's say, what attacker also does is like they see the time when it is perfect to send the email. So let's say now there's a time after a few months we need to kind of fill our Indian taxes, for an example. So just before that, the attacker would kind of send out multiple emails, let's say from the HR department, or from the or let's say from the income tax department, a spoofed email where they will ask the user to kind of, let's say they will trick the user into kind of downloading or clicking the link on the email. So that's one of the common attack factor, which can have profound impact to one of the easiest way to kind of get hold of the company or systems. It can have one of the major impact to the company. Okay, so phishing attack, then there is something called phishing, which is kind of on our voice. So that rather than our email, we do the same stuff. The attacker do the social engineering attack over the telephone or the text message. Okay, so that is one thing. So these are the kind of common attack vectors, and what we need to do is that we need to come up with a delivery vector matrix where we kind of showcase something like, let's say let's treat this matrix as the delivery attack vectors, and we showcase like what are the different kind of attack vectors which we're seeing, and what's the count of that in a company. So what will happen because of that is that once the leadership knows that, okay, this is the current trend of delivery attack vectors, that is kind of how the attacker are kind of targeting our company, they will kind of take certain actions on that. So let's say there was no protection over kind of protecting employee from phishing email. So once the leadership got an idea that, okay, the phishing email is one of the most important attack factor by how, let's say, the company is getting compromised. So if the company has fund, what they will do, they will prioritize that risk, and they will kind of implement some security controls, let's say automated spam detection tools and all, which kind of you can kind of the leadership will kind of implement, which will kind of help mitigating certain kind of effect of those delivery attack vectors. Okay, so let's say if an email comes now, once the security controls in place, there are automated scans over there which will kind of detect that, okay, if that mail is kind of phishing or not, and then either it will block the mail from kind of reaching out to the inbox of the employee, or let's say rather than kind of completely blocking it, those emails will kind of come to the SOC team for review. And if the review is fine, then the SOC team will allow that, okay, let's let the email kind of reach the inbox of the employee. So the reason is why I told that, okay, the email will not be kind of completely blocked, because those kind of controls are not always kind of 100% accurate. They can kind of generate multiple false positive, and they require kind of regular fine tuning. So let's say that there was an important email that was coming from the media team to the company, maybe let's say informing about a ongoing attack on the company, and if that get blocked by the security control, that will be again a major impact to the company. So that's why we need to have a certain architecture for the phishing email. Let's say it's blocked, but before getting blocked, the SOC team does a review, or let's say there's another team that does the review and kind of checks out, okay, if that is indeed phishing email or not. And one of the thing I like to discuss is that now in the age of like, let's say, generative AI like ChatGPT and all, you guys can also kind of if there is any opportunity, let's say for the phishing attack, for example, if there's any opportunity, you guys can also kind of implement, rather than maybe let's buying the tool, you guys can also implement your own phishing attack detections softwares, okay, which can kind of read the email and kind of detect, okay, if those emails are spam or kind of normal ones. Okay, so maybe in the machine learning part, which is kind of the last module, which we have planned to kind of discuss if we have time left. So one of the thing, maybe I'll keep a note of that. I'll kind of teach you guys one of the way in which you can kind of maybe implement machine learning algorithms and kind of run that on the email part, and auto detect if that email is kind of a spam or ham, like it is normal or suspicious. Okay, so we'll discuss about that. Okay, and there's one more maybe one more practical we can do, where we can kind of maybe let's say write a code what it does is